Thanksgiving dinner, while everyone was gathered around the table, I realized something I had ignored for years. My children were sitting inches away from me, yet I had never felt more invisible. Forks scraped against plates, phones lit up faces, and the glow of a dozen screens drowned out the warmth of candlelight. That was the night I understood. I no longer existed in their world, except as a blurry figure in the background of their social media photos. If you have ever sat in a room full of your own family and felt like a ghost, you will understand why I need to tell this story. My name is Margaret. I am 70 years old, and I have learned the hardest truth late in life, that sometimes the people you love most can erase you without even raising their voices. They do it with silence, with distraction, with the cruel indifference of eyes glued to a screen. I grew up in a time when family dinners were sacred. No one dared bring a radio to the table, much less a glowing device that could collapse the world into a single palm. When I married Noel, my late husband, we built a house that smelled of fresh bread and coffee, a place where conversation mattered more than convenience. For decades, our dining room was alive with stories, laughter, and arguments that ended with hugs. But slowly, without my noticing, that rhythm disappeared. It started subtly. My son Wade would check his phone between bites of turkey. My daughter Ruth would tilt her screen just enough to snap a photo of the mashed potatoes before taking a single spoonful. Their children, my grandchildren, barely looked up, their fingers dancing across tiny keyboards, while I asked about school and never received an answer longer than fine. At first, I told myself it was just a phase, that technology was harmless. But as years passed, the phase became permanent, and I became a prop in a staged family portrait, dragged into group photos only to prove we were together. Last Christmas, I cooked for 12 people. Ham glazed with honey, pies that took hours to bake, green beans sautéed the way Noel loved them. Everyone sat down, but instead of grace, the first sound was the click of camera shutters, the chorus of notifications. My granddaughter Emma arranged the plates to look better on her Instagram feed. My grandson Tommy announced to his followers that Grandma's house finally had Wi-Fi that worked. I stood there, spatula still in hand, waiting for someone to taste the food, to look at me, to say thank you. Instead, they posted, scrolled, and laughed at memes while the ham cooled untouched. I began to notice how rarely my children met my eyes. They were always halfway somewhere else, their attention divided between me and a stranger's joke online. When I spoke, their replies came delayed, as if buffering. Once, during my birthday dinner, I blew out the candles alone while the kids filmed each other making TikToks in the corner. That night, I wrapped the uneaten cake in foil and ate a slice cold alone long after everyone had left. Why am I telling you this? Because that silence, that invisibility, has a weight. It presses on. When I look back, I realize the signs had been there for years, but I chose to excuse them. I thought every generation had its own habits, its own way of bonding. I told myself that Wade and Ruth were just busy, that the kids were just adjusting to a fast world, and that I was the one who needed to catch up. But in truth, the distance had been growing long before I allowed myself to admit it. I remember one summer afternoon when Wade brought his family over for a barbecue. Noel was still alive then, his health already fragile, but his spirit bright. He stood by the grill turning burgers, the smoke curling into the air, while I set out the picnic table with potato salad, corn on the cob, and his favorite lemonade. I thought it would be a simple, happy day. But Wade spent most of the afternoon leaning against the fence, staring into his phone. His wife was snapping photos of every dish before touching them, directing the kids to smile and pose, telling them not to mess up their shirts because the likes would drop. Noel coughed several times, and I kept urging him to sit down, but no one seemed to notice. They were too busy capturing the image of family, not living it. That night, Noel said quietly to me, "Did you notice no one asked how I was feeling?" I tried to brush it off, but his words stayed with me. When he passed away 2 years later, I thought grief would bring the family closer. But instead, it became another photo opportunity for them. I remember standing in black at the graveside, clutching a handful of earth. Tears blurred my vision. But when I looked up, I saw Ruth angling her phone to catch the sunlight against the polished stone. She posted it later with the caption, "A beautiful farewell." I wanted to scream that nothing about that day was beautiful, that it was raw and jagged, that losing Noel felt like losing half my breath. But no one wanted to talk about pain. They wanted something elegant to share online. After Noel was gone, the silence of the house became unbearable. I tried to fill it with family dinners, invitations, calls. "Come by for Sunday supper," I told Wade and Ruth, but the replies were always vague. Sometimes they said the kids had soccer practice, sometimes that they were exhausted from work, but then I would see their posts online: family outings, concerts, trips to the mall. They had time to show the world how happy they were, but never time to sit with me. Once, on my birthday, I prepared a roast, set the table with fresh flowers, and put on the pearl earrings Noel had given me. I waited until dusk. My phone stayed silent. Finally, at 9 p.m., I saw Ruth's post: a photo of her holding a margarita glass on a rooftop bar, tagged with friends I had never met. No mention of my birthday, no call, no text. I sat there staring at the candles burning down to stubs, realizing I had prepared a feast for ghosts. Another memory. Emma, my granddaughter, had a school play. She had begged me weeks earlier to come see her perform, her small hands clutching mine, her eyes bright. I showed up that evening, clutching a bouquet of daisies, only to find the seats filled with parents and relatives, but none of my family had saved me a place. I ended up standing in the back, craning my neck to see her on stage. When it ended, I tried to give her the flowers, but Ruth swept her away for a photo shoot with her friends, arranging the bouquet in Emma's hands while telling me to hold on a minute. That minute never ended. They left without a word, while I drove home with the empty passenger seat beside me, the scent of daisies filling the car like a cruel reminder. The small humiliations piled up, each one cutting deeper. Wade once joked in front of everyone that I did not understand real life because I was not on Facebook. Ruth laughed and said I should be grateful the kids even came around because teenagers have better things to do. They said it lightly, but it struck like a blade. It was not just the phone screens. It was the way they no longer valued presence, no longer honored memory. When I brought out Noel's old watch to show Tommy, hoping to pass it down one day, he barely glanced at it before asking if he could borrow my Wi-Fi password. The weight of those moments built inside me, year after year. I told myself to endure, to be patient, that family is family no matter what. But inside, I was shrinking. I felt like wallpaper in my own home, fading while they captured curated smiles for strangers online. I suppose that is why I'm telling this story now, because those years of being overlooked, ignored, and quietly dismissed left scars you cannot see in a photo. And the night came when all that buried pain finally cracked open, when the truth I had been denying stood before me with the clarity of harsh daylight. That moment I will never forget. It was Thanksgiving again when everything finally cracked open. I had spent the entire week preparing, polishing the silver Noel and I had received on our wedding day, ironing the tablecloth with its faded embroidery, baking pies the way he liked them. I wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, this year would be different, that my children would look up from their screens long enough to see me, to see the life and love that still lingered in this house. The turkey was golden, the stuffing fragrant with sage, and I had even set aside a seat with Noel's old cardigan draped across it, a quiet way of keeping him near. The house was filled with the familiar aroma of roasted vegetables and cinnamon, but beneath it all, there was a heaviness in the air. Wade arrived first with his family, laughing as they carried in their phones like precious cargo. Ruth followed not long after, balancing dessert trays while her children argued about which post would get more likes. I stood in the doorway and smiled, but no one noticed the way my hands trembled. They brushed past me, already recording clips for their stories. We sat down, and before I could suggest we bow our heads in grace, every single phone was raised. Cameras flashed, captions were typed, hashtags chosen. The blessing of the meal had been replaced by the blessing of followers. I said nothing. I watched. I cut the turkey while Wade leaned over his screen, showing his wife a meme. Ruth positioned the cranberry sauce for a better angle. My grandchildren laughed at a video on TikTok while the mashed potatoes cooled untouched. It was then that my eyes caught something unusual. Emma had placed her phone beside her plate, screen still glowing. A group chat was open, the words too large to miss. Don't worry, we just need the pictures. We'll leave early once Grandma's done talking. I froze. My chest tightened as if the air itself had turned solid. I could feel my pulse in my temples. My name, Grandma, casually reduced to a prop in their schedule, a background they could discard once the right images were posted. My hand trembled as I set down the carving knife. No one noticed. Wade was laughing at something on his phone. Ruth was busy checking the comments on her post. The children were absorbed in their screens, their faces illuminated by artificial light rather than the glow of family. In that instant, the years of silence, of invisibility, of waiting for someone to notice came crashing down on me. It wasn't just distraction anymore. It was deliberate. They didn't come for me. They came for proof, for photographs, for curated moments that made them look like a family when the truth was hollow. I sat back in my chair, staring at Noel's empty seat, his cardigan draped like a shadow of who he had been. He would have spoken up, demanded attention, reminded them of respect. But I was alone now, and the weight of that realization pressed hard against my ribs. My throat felt dry, my lips numb. I excused myself quietly, pushing my chair back against the hardwood floor. The scrape finally made them glance up, if only for a moment, before returning to their devices. In the kitchen, I steadied myself against the counter. The smell of pumpkin pie, once sweet, now made my stomach churn. I thought about all the times I had excused them, all the times I had swallowed my disappointment. Birthdays spent waiting, holidays overshadowed by selfies, conversations drowned by notifications. Every memory twisted into content for someone else's amusement. I pulled out my own phone, an older model with a cracked case, and stared at it. Unlike theirs, it held no staged images, no likes, no hearts. Only voicemails from Noel, ones I had replayed on lonely nights just to hear his voice. I pressed play, his gentle tone filling the silence. "Myrtle, don't forget, the bank appointment is tomorrow at 10. Love you." My eyes burned. Even in death, Noel's words felt more present than the chatter in the next room. I walked back into the dining room, my phone in hand, and placed it on the table. The conversation stopped. Screens flickered off one by one. They looked at me as though noticing me for the first time all evening. "I saw the message," I said softly, my voice steady despite the storm inside. "The one that says you just need the pictures, that you'll leave once I'm finished talking." A silence fell heavier than any I had ever known. Wade shifted uncomfortably. Ruth's mouth opened, then closed again. The children looked away, their faces flushed with guilt. "Is that all I am to you?" I continued. "A backdrop? A face for your posts? 30 years in this house, 30 years of meals, memories, sacrifices, and now I'm just a hashtag." No one spoke. Wade fiddled with his fork, his eyes fixed on the tablecloth. Ruth stared at her plate, her hand frozen above her phone. My voice did not rise. I didn't scream. I simply asked the question that had haunted me for years. "When was the last time you saw me? Not through a lens, not through a post, but as I am. As your mother? As your grandmother?" The silence stretched on. In that moment, I knew something irreversible had broken. I was no longer part of their world, not in the way that mattered. I was content to be captured, cropped, and forgotten. But inside me, beneath the grief, something else stirred. A cold, clear determination. They thought they could reduce me to an image, erase me with indifference. They were wrong. The silence that followed my words was unlike anything I had ever heard in that dining room. Not the silence of comfort, not the hush before grace, but a silence that pressed against the walls like a storm held back by glass. Wade finally looked up from his plate, his face pale, his lips parting as if he wanted to speak, but no words would come. Ruth's fingers twitched over her phone, desperate to retreat to the safety of a screen, but even she seemed to know there was no filter that could hide this moment. I kept my gaze steady, my voice calm. I had no intention of shouting. Their guilt, their discomfort, was louder than anything I could have screamed. I picked up my phone and tapped the screen. The glow revealed the group chat I had seen on Emma's phone, the cruel line that reduced me to nothing more than a placeholder. I held it up for them to see. "Do you recognize these words?" I asked. My tone was measured, almost gentle, but my hand did not shake. Emma's face turned crimson, her eyes wide with panic. Tommy stared at his lap, cheeks blotched with shame. Wade leaned forward as if to shield them, but I stopped him with a look. "Read it, Wade," I said. His eyes skimmed the words, and his throat bobbed. He closed his eyes briefly, then set the phone down as though it burned him. "Mom? They didn't mean it," he muttered, his voice low, fragile. "They're kids. They're your children," I interrupted, my tone still calm. "And you are mine. Tell me, Wade, where do you think they learned it? This indifference, this habit of treating people as props in their own lives?" His face flushed, but he said nothing. Ruth finally broke the silence. "Mom, it's not what it looks like. We try to keep up with things, that's all. It's harmless. Everyone does it." I turned to her. "Harmless?" My lips curved into the faintest smile, though there was no joy in it. "Is it harmless when your father's grave becomes a photo backdrop? Is it harmless when my birthday is forgotten because your followers mattered more? Is it harmless when I am alive, breathing at the same table, and still invisible?" Ruth's mouth opened and closed, but she had no answer. The children fidgeted, glancing at each other, at me, anywhere but at the truth. I leaned back in my chair, folding my hands in my lap. My heart was steady now. For years I had been waiting for them to see me, to remember who I was. Tonight I realized that waiting had been a mistake. They needed to see the truth laid bare. I let the silence stretch again, forcing them to sit with it, to feel the weight of what they had done. "I am not angry," I said finally, my voice quiet. "Not anymore. I am only tired. Tired of cooking meals no one tastes. Tired of talking to people who never hear me. Tired of pretending that a photo can replace love." Wade rubbed his temples, his voice breaking. "Mom, please, don't say that. We didn't mean—" "You meant every bit of it," I said softly, cutting him off once more. "You may not have spoken the words aloud, but your silence has screamed them for years. Tonight only confirmed it." Emma began to cry then, silent tears streaking down her cheeks. For the first time in a long while, I looked at her and felt no anger, only sorrow. She had inherited not just Wade's eyes, but also his blindness. She had been raised to believe that affection could be measured in likes, that presence could be replaced with a post. That was not her fault alone, but it would be her burden. I reached for Noel's cardigan, still draped across the empty chair. My fingers traced the worn fabric, the last piece of him I had chosen to keep at the table. "Your father once told me that respect isn't given, it's shown," I said, my voice carrying the weight of memory. "He believed in this family. He believed in you, Wade. He believed in you, Ruth. If he were here tonight, do you think he would recognize what this family has become?" No one answered. The silence itself was the answer. I placed the cardigan neatly over my arm and stood. The scrape of the chair against the floor echoed like thunder in the still room. "Dinner is over," I said simply. "Eat if you wish, but I won't sit here any longer pretending we are what we are not." I turned and walked toward the stairs. Behind me, I heard whispers. Wade urging Ruth to say something, Ruth hissing that this wasn't the time, Emma's muffled sobs, but I didn't look back. For the first time in years, I felt steady. In my room, I sat on the edge of the bed Noel and I had shared for decades. His reading glasses were still on the nightstand, exactly where he had left them. The house was quiet, but not the hollow quiet I had grown used to. This silence carried resolve. Downstairs, my family remained, but I knew in that moment they no longer held power over me. They could post their photos, craft their perfect captions, chase the applause of strangers. Let them. The truth had been spoken aloud, and once spoken, it could never be unsaid. They had seen themselves in the harsh mirror of my words, and whether they admitted it or not, they would never forget it. As I folded Noel's cardigan and placed it gently beside his glasses, I realized something important. Tonight was not the end. It was the beginning of something else. A life where I no longer waited to be noticed. A life where I no longer accepted scraps of attention disguised as love. I had spoken the truth, and though it left scars in that dining room, it also gave me back my voice. And for the first time in a long while, I was ready to use it. In the days after Thanksgiving, the atmosphere in my house changed. The silence I left at the table followed Wade and Ruth long after they walked out the door. I could feel it in the way Wade hesitated before calling, in the way Ruth's texts were shorter than usual. They were shaken, though not enough to truly understand. I did not chase them, not anymore. I had spoken the truth, and now I waited to see what they would do with it. It did not take long for reality to strike. One evening, I received a frantic call from Ruth. Her voice trembled as she spoke quickly, words tumbling over each other. Mom, something happened with Emma. Can you come? The desperation in her tone pierced through me. My first instinct was to rush over, but I forced myself to stay calm. Tell me what happened, I said, steady, unhurried. Ruth admitted that Emma had been humiliated online. A private conversation with her friends had been leaked, screenshots spreading through school and beyond. The same platforms that had consumed her attention, the same followers she had sought for validation, now turned against her with a cruelty only strangers could wield. Emma locked herself in her room, refusing to eat, refusing to speak. Ruth confessed she did not know what to do. For years, she had handed her children screens instead of guidance. And now, when those screens betrayed them, she was helpless. I arrived at Ruth's house that night. Emma's sobs could be heard through the closed door, muffled but raw. Ruth stood outside, pale, shaken, whispering apologies she could not finish. Wade arrived soon after, his face drawn tight with worry. For the first time in years, both of them looked at me not with distraction, not with indifference, but with desperation. They wanted me to fix what they had broken. I knocked on Emma's door softly. "It's Grandma," I said. There was a pause, then a faint rustling inside. After a long silence, the lock clicked, and the door opened just enough for me to slip in. Emma's eyes were swollen, her cheeks blotched red. Her phone lay abandoned on the floor, screen dark, the once precious device now a source of shame. I sat on the edge of her bed, speaking quietly. "Emma, I know what it feels like to be invisible. I know what it feels like to have people treat you as if you don't matter. But let me tell you something. What those strangers say about you doesn't define you. What they post doesn't hold your worth. You are more than their words, more than their cruelty." Tears welled again in her eyes, but this time she leaned against me, resting her head on my shoulder. I stroked her hair, feeling the weight of her sorrow. Downstairs, Wade and Ruth waited anxiously. When I emerged, their faces were full of questions, guilt, fear. Wade's voice cracked as he said, "Mom, we didn't realize. We thought it was just harmless fun. We didn't see where it was leading." I looked at him, steady and unblinking. "You didn't see because you didn't want to see. You were too busy chasing attention to notice what it was costing your children. And now Emma is paying the price." Ruth covered her mouth, tears streaming down. "We should have listened. We should have." She stopped, unable to finish. For the first time, their arrogance, their distraction, was gone. In its place was fear and shame. The pedestal of screens and followers had crumbled, leaving them exposed. The days that followed were quiet. Emma began to recover slowly, avoiding her phone, spending more time in silence. Wade and Ruth tried to adjust, setting boundaries, limiting screen time, but the damage had already been done. They had built their lives on shallow connections, and when those connections turned hostile, they realized how hollow it all was. As for me, I watched from a distance. I helped Emma when she reached for me, but I no longer offered myself freely to Wade and Ruth. They had made their choices for years, and now they were learning what it meant to live with the consequences. One evening, Wade came to my house alone. He sat at the kitchen table, where his father once read the newspaper, his hands clasped together. "Mom," he said softly, "I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to make it right." I poured him a cup of coffee and slid it across the table. "You can't undo years with one apology," I told him, "but you can start by being present. Not with a phone in your hand, not with half your mind elsewhere. Just be here. With your children, with me, if you choose. Presence is worth more than any post." He nodded, his eyes wet. For once, he did not reach for his phone. He sat there, silent, holding the warmth of the cup between his palms, and I saw a glimpse of the boy he once was, the boy who used to crawl into my lap after nightmares. Perhaps it wasn't too late for him, but the lesson had come at a cost. In that moment, I felt no triumph, only a deep, quiet clarity. Life had delivered its justice not through my hands, but through the same glowing screens they had worshipped. They had lost their illusion, their control, their perfect images. And I had lost something too, the hope that love alone could hold a family together. I walked him to the door, the evening air cool against my face. "Wade," I said, my voice low but firm, "remember this. Respect isn't found in followers. Love isn't proven by pictures. If you can't see the people in front of you, one day they'll be gone, and all you'll have left are shadows. He swallowed hard and nodded. I closed the door gently behind him, knowing the echo of my words would stay longer than any post online. The weeks that followed brought a strange kind of quiet into my life. It was not the lonely silence that had once gnawed at me, nor the hollow quiet of being ignored at my own table. This was different. It was the stillness of release, the peace that comes when you stop waiting for something that will never come. I no longer set the table for 12. I cooked smaller meals, enough for myself, enough to savor without worrying whether anyone else would notice. I began walking every morning, the crisp air filling my lungs, the sound of leaves crunching under my shoes reminding me that life still had texture beyond the glow of a phone screen. Wade visited occasionally, less often than he promised, but when he did, he came without the constant distraction of his phone. He listened more, though he rarely knew what to say. Ruth remained distant, her pride still too sharp to let her face me fully. Emma, however, was different. She visited quietly, sitting with me in the garden, asking me about Noel, about how things used to be before everyone was consumed by screens. She no longer carried her phone like a lifeline, and I could see in her eyes the beginning of change. Sometimes she would reach for my hand, holding it the way she had when she was small. Those moments mattered more than any apology. But I did not fool myself. I knew the family I once dreamed of could not be rebuilt by a few visits or a handful of tears. Too many years had been wasted, too many meals left cold. What I had lost would not return. And yet, I no longer grieved the same way. Instead, I let go. I understood now that waiting for their recognition had only diminished me. I had been giving away pieces of myself, hoping for scraps of attention, when I should have been living fully in the time I still had. One evening, I sat on the porch with Noel's cardigan over my shoulders. The sun was setting, painting the sky in soft oranges and purples. I thought about all the years we had spent together, about his belief that respect must be shown, not demanded. He had been right, and though our children had failed to show it, life itself had reminded me of my worth. I was not defined by their neglect. I was not defined by their posts. I was not defined by their silence. I was defined by the love I had given, the sacrifices I had made, and the strength I had found in letting go. That night, I gathered the family photos from the shelves. Some I kept, some I put away in boxes. I was no longer interested in curating a perfect image of what we once were. I wanted only the memories that felt real. The laughter Noel and I shared, the warmth of Emma's small hand in mine, the quiet joy of mornings in the garden. The rest, I released. I no longer needed proof of a family that only existed in pictures. As the days turned into months, I began writing again. Journals filled with thoughts, memories, lessons. I told myself that even if Wade and Ruth never truly learned, perhaps Emma would. Perhaps she would carry forward a different truth, that presence matters more than performance, that love is measured not by likes but by moments. And if she remembered that, then maybe something good could still grow from all this pain. Looking back now, I see the path clearly. I see the years of neglect, the night of confrontation, the collapse that followed, and finally the release. It was not the story I had wanted, but it was the story I needed. Because it forced me to stop waiting for a family that would never see me and to start living for myself, in peace, in truth. If you have listened to me this far, maybe you too know what it feels like to be unseen. Maybe you too have sat at a table where laughter rang hollow, where attention was given to glowing screens instead of beating hearts. And if you have, then hear this. You are worth more than their distraction. You are more than their neglect. Your presence matters, even if they fail to see it. This is why I share my story, not for pity, not for anger, but for the quiet hope that someone listening will choose differently, that someone will look up from their phone tonight, meet the eyes of the person sitting across from them, and truly see them. Because one day, when the screens go dark and the posts fade into nothing, it is those moments that will remain. And if my story has stayed with you, if you felt even a piece of yourself in my words, then I ask you to stay with me a little longer. Subscribe, follow along, not for me, but for the reminder that we are not alone in these struggles. Let this channel be a place where stories like mine live on, where the lessons of loss and the strength of survival are never forgotten. Because sometimes the only way to heal from being unseen is to share the truth so it cannot be erased. I folded Noel's cardigan one last time and placed it gently beside me. The sky had gone dark, but I no longer feared the silence. I had found my voice, and I had found my peace. And now, I leave the rest to you.